You're live.
We're live.
Mm-hmm.
Let's have to start.
Yep, go ahead.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our virtual town hall meeting today. I'm Michelle Fanger, the chair of the Jamaica Diaspora Legal Support and Immigration Task Force. And today we're going to give you a very informative session from one of our members. Her name is Nadine C. Atkinson Flowers, and she practices the areas of immigration here in the United States. She offers consultation to U.S. attorneys and their clients about the effects of Jamaican law on their U.S. immigration cases. In Jamaica, she practices immigration, criminal law, real estate, family, and legal consultancy. And today her focus will be mostly on areas of law that affects diasporans. And she has a lot of information to provide to us. And at the end of her presentation, we'll have a question and answer session. So you could definitely send your questions and you will get answers. Just remember, as I always do as a disclaimer, with the information we're providing, it's a client-attorney relationship is not established. If you do need an attorney to represent you on any of the issues, you could reach out to the organization, or you could reach out directly to the attorney that's doing the presentation, and you can establish a relationship. So for today's topic, it will be common legal issues in Jamaica faced by Jamaicans in the diaspora. Nadine, over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. And we are very grateful for you to be joining us this evening. I am going to share my screen so that you can see the topics as I am going along. Now, as Michelle just said, we are grateful that you've joined us. However, we want to make it very clear that no legal relationship, no attorney-client relationship has been established. The information that we're sharing with you is really for general purposes. And so if you have questions that are specific, we are happy to help to answer them at the end of the presentation, or as Michelle indicated, you can get in touch with the organization and we'll try our best to see what we can do. For the questions that we can't answer this evening, we are also happy to take those and to try to find you information that will be of benefit to you. The topic is common legal issues in Jamaica faced by Jamaicans in the diaspora. Now, it's a known fact that perhaps as many Jamaicans live outside of Jamaica as do live in Jamaica. And so from time to time, there are issues that persons need to have resolved or have left unresolved. And those come up, and as such, you need some kind of legal assistance. Just want to share with you a little tidbit. Set the stage.
Mm-hmm. Nadine, it's not playing.
And indeed, ladies and gentlemen, we all know nowhere better than yard. Jamaica is the best and continues to be so. We're going to look at about 4 or 5 particular areas in some depth. We're going to talk a little bit about property issues, dealing with government agencies. There's going to be a little bit of information on the criminal law, family matters, other general questions and general issues. And at the end, we hope if you have questions that we can certainly give you some answers. Now, as it regards property, when we speak of property, most persons tend to think of land. And yes, that is perhaps the most logical definition. However, property is a little more than simply land. It is anything that you own, anything of value to you. But specific to the discussion this evening, we're going to look at about 4 areas. Issues surrounding titles for land, land tax matters, squatters on your property, and at the end for property, we'll talk a little bit about buying as well as selling property, some do's and don'ts. Let's start with the issue of title questions. Now, buying or selling property is perhaps one of the most significant economic investments someone can ever make. Yet, it's been shown time and time again that persons will hand over large sums of monies, sometimes to practical strangers, and they are unfortunately filched out of those monies without recourse because they have nothing to prove that they actually handed over money to person X or person Y. It is part of the law in Jamaica that if you are buying or selling property, you need to have what is called a sale agreement. That's for the protection of the seller as also for the protection of the buyer, because that is a document that will be going to the government's office, specifically the stamp office, where they will peruse it, they will look at it carefully and ensure that certain things are in place. Now, you do not necessarily have to have an attorney if you are purchasing property, but it is prudent to have one. And if you are someone who does not reside in Jamaica, it is perhaps in your best interest to ensure that you have someone in Jamaica who is looking out for your interest. Usually that is an attorney, but you could also have a trusted person for that. As regards the title, at the end of a transaction, title should pass hands. Title should change hands. I am the seller, you are the buyer. At the end of this transaction, you are now going to be the owner of this property, and the title should reflect that. The title should show that Nadine Atkinson Flowers, who owned the property at 1A Beach Street, Kingston 10, sold it to John Brown of Pennsylvania, United States, or London, United Kingdom. That shows clearly that the property has been transferred. Of course, there are a lot of steps in between, but at the end of the day, the new owner of the property must have something in his or her hand that proves categorically that this is now yours. Therefore, it is not enough that you simply hand over your money to someone and you get a receipt. The transaction involves far more than that. And unfortunately, we have seen situations where persons are perhaps unaware, perhaps they trusted the wrong person, perhaps they thought this family member who is on the ground in Jamaica can help me to make this purchase or to make this sale. And at the end of it, they end up holding literally the empty bag, and someone has gone with their money, and also someone has gone with their property. Now, the fact that there is distance between someone who is in the diaspora and Jamaica where they're purchasing property causes a lot of problems because you are not there. And so you can't literally oversee whatever the transaction is that's taking place. And so it is important for you to ensure that you have adequate documentation about the transaction. That is critical. It is not enough for you to call on the telephone and to be told by even the lawyer that yes, it is going through, you will have the title in your hand next week, or to be told by your family member, yes, everything is fine. You need to see documents. Law requires documents. That is critical. That's how you protect yourself. That's your evidence in case of an emergency, in case of an issue. In fact, that is your evidence to show that you are on your way to buying or selling a property. And so that is extremely important, that for every step of a transaction regarding property, for every step of every transaction, to be frank, you ensure that you're seeing the documentation that is related. As it relates to land taxes, from time to time, you will have heard of persons who left their property for long periods of time, haven't gone back to Jamaica in many years, and suddenly somebody says, do you know that so-and-so is paying the land tax on your property? Because there is a peculiar notion in our country that if you begin to pay the land tax for someone's property, you most likely will sooner or later end up owning that property. No, that comes with some, there are caveats to that, which I'll go into in a minute. But suffice to say, if you own property, and of course the land tax has to be paid, you should ensure that whoever is paying that land tax sends to you the receipt. As a matter of fact, you could go one step further. You are able to pay for certain things online with the tax administration offices of Jamaica. You go on their website, think you register your transaction, and you pay for your transaction yourself so that you can get your receipt when you pay for your land taxes or any other issue related to taxation in our country. The persons who they've left Jamaica for a long time and they have, whether it's a house or a piece of land, and they don't visit the property, they don't have anybody visit it, and a few years down the road, they hear that there is what we're calling a squatter, somebody who is there without your lawful permission, living on your property. But you don't worry because you're living somewhere else, you're living far away, life is taking place, and you have other things to worry about. And the time passes. Now, if after a particular period of time passes, usually I think it's 12 years in Jamaica, and you make no significant efforts towards ensuring that that squatter who is on your property is aware of your existence as the owner of that property, they can put a claim in court for your property under what is known as a law of adverse possession, because they would have been living on your property undisturbed for a particular period of time. You haven't gone there, you haven't sent anybody there, you haven't sent them any written notices to say, look, this property is mine, you need to leave. And so time passes, and with the passage of time, there is going to be reduction in your property rights. And so it is very important that if you have property in Jamaica, if you have land in Jamaica, you make obvious steps to make the world know that this is your property, whether it is by fencing that property. If it's in a more rural area and it gets bushy, you have someone bush the property, you fence it with, whether it's barbed wire or whatever, you put up signs on it, no trespassing, private property, all of that. From time to time, you have family members go there and check around, pick the fruits from the property, all of that. If it's a house, the same thing applies, because persons have been known to literally jimmy the lock off doors and find themselves living in your place. So you need to ensure that you're protecting your property, even though you're separated by the sea. Now, the issue of buying and selling property, I just went through a few of it, but regarding that, a few do's and don'ts. If you're buying property or selling property in Jamaica. It's never a good idea to buy it sight unseen. Now there's COVID, so people are afraid to travel, but previously people would buy property without even seeing it. Obviously, if you have someone trustworthy on the ground in Jamaica, you can do that. But it is more prudent that you actually see what you're getting, because sometimes what you're getting is, as we will call it in Jamaica, olo. And at the end of the day, you find that you have lost your money. There are a lot of persons now who are being put before the courts for various types of scams. Land scams are one of those, because persons will literally tell you that they own a particular piece of property and they will present you with forged documents, but you won't necessarily know that they're forged. And so you might proceed with a sale, and at the end of the day, you lose your money. So as I said at the beginning, it's very important to ensure that you know exactly who you're dealing with when you are engaging or embarking on a land transaction in Jamaica. I'm going to talk a little bit more now about dealing with government agencies. I think all of us here can probably attest to the fact that we have had to deal with some government agency in Jamaica, whether while we were there or since living abroad, in whether as close as Florida or as far away as Japan or China or wherever. And most likely everybody has a horror story to tell about dealing with our government agencies. And so I won't go too much into it, but I will suffice to say I'm going to look at just 4 agencies today. PICA, everybody calls that the passport office, but it's really the Passport, Immigration and Citizenship Agency. You want to renew your passport, your Jamaican passport. That is where it will end up, even if it is you are utilizing the services of one of the consulates nearest to where you are. So for example, there's a consulate in New York in the United States, and there is one, I think, in Miami. In other countries, there are also consulates that you can seek their assistance if it is you need to have services conducted regarding your passport. When you're dealing with our passport office, it is important to realize that for the most part, you may well have to send original documents. So if you're renewing your passport, for example, you are required to send an original birth certificate. If you're married, if you're a married woman in particular, you're required to send an original marriage certificate, but they will send them back. But of course, dependent on the transaction, it may take some time. If it's a new passport as opposed to a renewal of a passport, it may take a little longer. And so it is never obviously a good idea to send the only original passport, the only original birth certificate that you have, or the only original marriage certificate, or your kids' birth certificates. So it's always better to have had several originals from the Registrar General's office. And you can also access their services online and get copies of, get originals of those documents. The National Housing Trust. Most persons, I think, would say that dealing with the National Housing Trust is usually a fairly painless experience. And I think that also goes for persons who live in the diaspora. There is a number that several numbers that you can call, but they also have a very useful online chat. That online chat has saved many a person. So for example, as soon as April, I believe it is, when NHT contributions are ready, you can go online, put your TRN in, your NIS number, and you can access information about your NHT contribution refunds. If you have a mortgage on a property at home in Jamaica, those will be applied. If not, you can advise them as to how you wish to have your refund distributed. The NIS, National Insurance Scheme. Now, as it relates to the National Insurance Scheme, if you were employed in Jamaica and you were contributing, whether you were in, let's say, for example, you were self-employed or you were working with the government or a private company, you would have made contributions to that. And as we all inevitably grow older, it's useful to begin to make contact with the NIS office as it relates to your pension and those kinds of benefits. Those offices are usually quite customer friendly as well, and you can also find information about them. We're going to put at the end some useful agencies and their information and what you can get from them. The Inland Revenue, which we all call the tax office. The Inland Revenue has quite a bit of information online. You can make payments for certain types of services online as well through the secure portal. Of course, you need to make sure that you are actually on their site where you will be able to make various payments, or in the alternative, you can have persons going into the offices for you. There's practically one in every parish to pay your various transactions and to ensure that they get your receipts, which they should promptly send to you. Now, let's talk a little bit about the criminal law. And we are not here saying that you have a criminal case or that you're a criminal or anything of that nature. All we're saying is that life happens and persons may well have had interactions, we will call it, with the criminal law system in Jamaica. Sometimes these persons leave the country and they might have, let's say, for example, an outstanding court case. If you do have such an outstanding court case, it has to be resolved in a particular way, especially if you need to get, for example, a background check for certain types of jobs in the country where you are living. Sometimes they have to be resolved before you leave Jamaica. And so you might well need to obtain court documents for your cases. If that is so, you, depending on which court you had your issue in or the case, you could have been a victim, you could have been the defendant in a matter, you can go into the court's offices and advise them as to what you need, and they will be able to tell you how to proceed. Unfortunately, from time to time, people will go back home and they might have witnessed a crime, or they might well be the victim of a crime. Let's take, for example, the issue of property that we were talking about, that someone literally stole your money that you sent to them for the purchase of a property. Then you're a victim of a crime. And you would have gone to the police, given a statement about the matter, and then you leave Jamaica, expecting that the matter is going to resolve just like that. But that is not so. You will be expected to return to Jamaica for a trial, to give your evidence, to tell what happened to you. Sometimes people don't understand that. Sometimes people don't even want to do that, because people will say, oh, I'm afraid, I don't want to go. I don't know what might happen if I go. But you must remember that if you have been the victim of a crime or you're a witness to a crime, your evidence is going to be needed. And especially in cases where you've been defrauded of your money, persons have stolen your identity, all of that can only be resolved in the court system if you go back home and go and give the evidence. Of course, from time to time, persons, you're traveling, you are migrating permanently to another country, you're getting a job in another country, you're going to need what we call in Jamaica your police records, which means that you go to the police records office and they take your fingerprints and they check to see if you have any criminal cases, whether pending or in the past, in their system. If it is that you do have what is called a record, meaning you had some negative interactions with the court system, then that will show on your criminal record. If it is you do not show in the system at all, meaning you have never had any interface or a negative interface, as it were, with the criminal law system, then it will show that John Brown's name does not appear in our system. Persons tend to neglect the need for a police record until literally the very last moment. Now, it does not take 2 minutes for you to get it. It takes some time because you have to go to the criminal records office, they have to take your prints, they have to send it to the various courts to make sure that what they're giving you is an accurate reflection of what it is that has taken place in your interface or lack of interface. And so if, for example, you know that you are migrating to the United States, please do not wait until 3 weeks before you actually need the documents, or 3 days before you need the documents to find yourself at the criminal records office. If you know that you're applying for a particular type of job, for example, a cruise liner, and you're going to be gone for months, please do not wait until you're boarding the ship to go and get your police record, because it does take some time, because accuracy is going to be key. And so that leads, I think, nicely into the last area for criminal law, the matter of US immigration and the Jamaican criminal law. When and it applies to wherever you're living in the world. If you are going to be contemplating residing there permanently, or even to be getting a job, so you would need a work permit, you are going to have to prove that in your home country, Jamaica, you did not have negative interface with the criminal law system. And if you did, you are going to need to explain what happened. And the explanation will come in the form of your criminal record, your police record, as we call it. I want to touch a little bit on family law. In Jamaica, all of us have, well, most of us have what we call pet names or aliases. So your name is really Marie Hines, but your friends call you Putus, your mother calls you Dana, your father calls you Dashika, and your friends call you Renee. Now, when you are filling out your official documents, let's say, for example, you are applying for a work permit, or you are migrating and you need to get those documents. When the form asks you for your name, you need to put what is your legal name on such a form. Your legal name is that on your birth certificate. The form might go on to say, do you have any aliases? And then at that point, you can put information about whatever it is people call you. Let's say, for example, though, that you've had a name change by deed poll. You have decided to change your name, whether it's your first name, your last name, or both. You need to have the documents for that to show that evidence. That's called a deed poll. Or if you change your name by marriage, usually women, you would have to have a copy of your marriage certificate. If you are adopted, you would have your adoption certificate, which would have your name on it. If, for example, you adopted a child and that child's name is now hyphenated, so the child has his or her birth father's or birth mother's last name dependent, the the adoption certificate would reflect that. The issue of custody, and that is very, very crucial. In Jamaica, once a man and a woman share a child, that child is in the joint custody of both parents. There are some countries, for example, some states in the United States, where if a child is a child of a single man and a single woman, the mother is considered to be the person with sole custody. That is not the law in Jamaica. But persons assume that because I am mother, I must be the one with sole custody. That is not so, unless the law, meaning the court, has made such a declaration that mother has sole custody of child and father has visitation. It is not how the law deals with it. So you as the mother can't just decide that you're taking the child out of the jurisdiction and the father doesn't know where you're going. And he has no rights to know where you're going either. And the converse is true, but unfortunately it is usually the mothers who would make such a decision. If it is that you do go to court and the court makes an order as regards custody, that order of the court has to be followed. Otherwise, the person who's not following it is going to be in problems. The person will be in contempt of the court's order, and there are sanctions that can follow. We see a lot of these issues in the summer when persons want to take their children abroad for holidays. One parent comes to the court or comes to an attorney and says, well, I want to take the child for summer holiday to Spain or to the US or wherever, and the father is being unreasonable or the mother is being unreasonable. The prudent thing to do is not to just kiss your teeth and wave off the parent and pack the child up and go if there's a court order in place. The prudent thing to do is to return to the court, speak to the court officers there to get audience with the judge, preferably the judge who would have dealt with the case before, and explain the situation so that the order of the court can be what we call varied. The court can say, well, for the summer, mother can take the child to wherever, and the child is to be returned to Jamaica for school on or by the 31st of August. Failing that, the parent who decides to flout the order of the court may well find themselves in far more problems than they want to have. Increasingly, parents are being asked, especially if they're not married, when they're leaving the country by the customs officers, immigration officers, do you have a letter from the other parent to say you can take this child out of the jurisdiction? The law on that is kind of hazy for me personally, but increasingly it's happening, increasingly they're asking for it. I have not personally had to deal with it, but I know of other attorneys who have had to intervene in such cases. And so that, you know, a word to the wise is always good. Matter of divorce. In Jamaica, we have what is called no-fault divorce. So there's no need to delve into he did and he didn't do, and she did and she didn't do. Law requires 12 months separation continuously. Therefore, it means that you would have had no sexual relations. You could even be living in the same house, but you are living what we call separate lives. Once you can prove that separate life, then you can go forward. Of course, if there are children, the law requires that there are proper arrangements put in place for those children. If there are no children, if there's no property, the law indicates the way in which you are to proceed. You do not even need to appear in court for your divorce. You have your attorney complete all of your paperwork, and when you're finished, you sign on the dotted line, having read it, of course, and the documentation is submitted to the court. As I said, if there are children, the court is very anxious when there are children in divorce proceedings, because the court wants to ensure that there are arrangements put in place for the children's education, for their religious instruction, for health issues, pardon me, if those are of concern. And of course, where the children will live, with whom he or she will reside.
Sorry.
The issue of maintenance for children. If there is a court order by the court as regards maintenance, it is always crucial to make sure you're following the court's orders. So for example, if you are migrating, you still have an obligation to maintain your child, obviously. And if there's a court order, that's a double obligation. Some persons will tend to migrate and then the arrangement becomes informal. I will send money by Western Union when I can, or my mother will give her the money when she can. And nobody's keeping records, nobody's keeping check. And something happens and one party decides, well, I am going to be going to court to say that you are not following the maintenance order. We have not got anything for the longest while. And when the court's officers check the records, that's exactly what they will see, because no money was paid into court for the child for 1 year, 2 years, whatever time period, despite the fact that you were sending the money to your mother and your mother gave it to her or whatever. So the suggestion here is that if you are living abroad and you have a child or children in Jamaica where there's a court order for their maintenance, it is always a very good idea to ensure that you have someone pay those money into court, because you will get a receipt and you will be able to prove that, yes, I am following the orders of the court. So that's important for you to remember. As regards adoption, in Jamaica, a lot of us have what we call our pumpkin vine relatives. And so she's my third cousin twice removed, but she's really my sister. Or is my brother's daughter, but she's my daughter because my brother died when she was small and I have had her since then. She actually calls me mommy. That is not, in the eyes of the law, an adoption. An adoption in the eyes of the law in Jamaica and most countries requires that the court says the rights of the parents have been severed, and this child is now the child, as it were, of John Brown and Mary Brown, or John Brown and Janet Davis. And the adoption decree is signed by the judge, and the adoption certificate is produced. This issue comes up when persons, especially when persons want to take these children abroad. A little less so as regards schooling, but certainly as regards migration. And unfortunately, you will find that it is only at that point that some children might realize, or the parents might realize, that the legal formalities that they needed to follow to ensure that this was a true adoption in the sense of the law have not been followed. And so it's very important for persons to recognize the difficulties, the emotional upheaval and turmoil, and explaining all of the why this will not happen or why it will take a long time to happen. So we would commend to you that if it is you have a child that you're seeking to adopt, that you follow the correct procedures to make it formal. Now, there are a few other issues that I want to touch on briefly. For example, a power of attorney. You're living abroad, but you had a life whilst you were in Jamaica, and you still have parts of that life in Jamaica. And so you might want, for example, to have business done at home, but you decide, oh, I'll have my brother do it, or I'll have my cousin or my friend or whomever do it. That person properly should have lawful authority to do that. You can give them what is called a power of attorney, and that can be general or it can be specific. It can be as specific as, please sell my Honda 2020 CRV with title number 123, chassis number ABC. Or it can be as general as, I, Nadine Atkinson Flowers, I'm giving you, Tom Strokes, power of attorney over my properties and business in Jamaica to do as you think is best on my behalf. That one I would not recommend because it's far too general. But it is important that if you're conducting business at home and you're not there, that you give somebody the correct type of authority to do so on your behalf. Let's look briefly at contracts. Even if it is just a piece of paper to say, I, Nadine Atkinson Flowers, am paying $10,000 to John Brown for XYZ, and you sign and John Brown sign and the date is on it. It is very important for you to have a contract. In Jamaica, we are a very informal people for a lot of things. And so we do a lot of things simply by word of mouth. There are times when obviously that will stand up in court, but it's going to take so much more than if you had just ensured that you had a proper contract. And since you are actually not at home in Jamaica, it is so very important to ensure that whatever business you're transacting, you have some kind of contract in place. Some persons have their insurance policies at home, they have loans from financial institutions, and once they leave, some people tend to forget them. The insurance premium is bad and not so bad. It just simply means you'll probably lose your money, which you probably don't want to do. But let's say you have a loan. You still need to service your loan because obviously that could well be a negative against you in the future. And of course, just touching a little bit on accounting for monies that you would have paid for goods and or services. Obviously, if you're forking over your hard-earned money from wherever, you ought to ensure that you get something in writing. It is not enough, ladies and gentlemen, to ask your sister to pay such and such for you, and she tells you that it has been paid, and she does not show you something to say it has been paid. Especially if business is being done with the government. The government will issue receipts. And so it is crucial for you to press to say, where is the receipt for so-and-so? How come you haven't shown it to me? And in fact, you yourself can get on the phone, get on your smartphone, go online and find out if your business is being done in Jamaica, even as you are living hundreds of thousands of miles away. It is not enough to just throw up your hands in the air and say, well, me not there, what am I for do? That is not enough. You are able, by the power of the internet, on which we are speaking right now, to ensure that your business is done and done properly. And I end by giving you a few agencies at home that you can find some useful information through. For example, the GIS, they have a very great website that gives information about so many different areas, consulates in different countries, information for returning residents, and so much more. I hope that you've enjoyed the presentation, that we've given you some food for thought. And if you have any questions, I hope I'll be able to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nadine. That was a lot of information, great information. And I did get 2 questions that hopefully you can address them right now. If not, we'll provide you the information after. The first question asks, can you buy a property using a JP? I think just that a piece.
Can you buy a property using a JP? All right. I'm going to put it to you this way. It is always more prudent to use an attorney if you're purchasing property, and I'll tell you why. A sale agreement has to be drafted by someone. Somebody has to write it. Somebody has to check to make sure that you are lawfully able to sell the property. Somebody has to make sure that the restrictive covenants on the property have not been breached. And I can tell you this, the financial institutions such as NHT, Jamaica National, Victoria Mutual, all of those will not sell you, sorry, they will not partner with you to give you a loan for a property if the restrictive covenants have been breached. There are certain areas in the country where persons have put up houses and they have built fences or they've built second and third stories on the homes. And those are breaches of the covenants because the covenants say you are to have a single story building. Most times a justice of the peace, and I mean no disrespect, I do know lots of justices of the peace, may not know that, but an attorney ought to know that and can protect your interests. So I guess the short answer is I humbly would suggest you use an attorney.
Okay, thank you. We have an uninvited guest. 1 second. Okay, the next question that we have is from another individual. His statement is, what if the dad and mom, this is a family law question. What if the dad and mom have been, 1 second. I apologize.
No problem. Life happens.
Yeah, it happens. Okay, so from the beginning. Okay, what if the dad and mom have been separated for over 2 years, and from day one, the child have been living with the dad, even though I might add the mother who doesn't live, I guess, very far, and have a business in the same community, and the child sees the mother daily or calls her daily, whom should have sole custody if the cases arises?
Well, the court like to say this, in the best interest of the child. So in a scenario like this, where the child has lived with the father from literally, as you say, day one, and you go to court and you tell the judge that it is likely, but this is court, so I can't say it will happen, but it is likely that the person who has had the child since day one will get sole custody. And remember, you know, custody is a physical thing because the child obviously can't live in 2 places at once. So one person will have legal custody of the child, meaning the child is going to live at 110 Half-a-Tree Road. But in the summer, the child is going to live in Germany, in Australia, in St. Elizabeth, or whatever. So in a case like that, it would seem to me that whomever has had the child since day one, unless it can be proven that it's not in the best interest of the child for that arrangement to continue, I would think that that's how the court would rule.
Yeah, that is like similar to Florida. They always look out for the best interest of the child. So thank you so much for that information. Our presentation today, as she's mentioned, her name is Nadine. She's a part of our task force. We will be posting the slides that she has and the information she has provided on our Facebook page. Our Facebook page is Jamaica Diaspora Legal Support Sector and Immigration Task Force. Please also follow our website because we will be hosting these monthly virtual town halls where we'll have different attorneys who practice in various areas of law to present information within those fields. So please stay tuned, and also we'll be posting this broadcast on also our page, so you could tune in at any time because it was a lot of information touching on squatter lands. A lot of people reside here and forget about lands that they have back home that they might want to have access to. And as she said, sometimes people will pay tax on your property and take your property right from under you. So those are things that will provide you and provide guidance, which Nadine has practiced and still practices in Jamaica. So she'll be able to provide you guidance. And I want to thank you all for tuning in. And as I said, please follow our website. You can go on JDTAN.org, or you could follow us on Facebook at Jamaica Diaspora Legal Support Sector and Immigration Task Force. Any final words, Nadine?
No, just to say that we hope that persons will continue to join us, even as we are sometimes out of the country. The country is always in our hearts. And I think, is it next month is our next meeting for?
Yes, next month. And our topic next month, sorry to cut you off, will be on human trafficking. And one of our attorneys, Latanji Williams, she's a licensed attorney here in Jacksonville, Florida. She'll be doing a presentation on that topic. Nadine, back to you.
Thank you very much. And I hope you'll join us for our next session. Have a good evening.
Have a great evening. Bye, everyone.